Hello and welcome to the Wolf Den Podcast, your home for competitive Digimon TCG discussion and news. I'm your host Nako, joined by my co-host Anitsu. Listen to us on your favorite podcasting networks, available now on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon. Link in the description below, or find us at Wolf Den Digimon TCG.
On top of that, we also stream over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, and this gets uploaded as a video under the YouTube channel of Zenitsu. Today's episode is going to be a little bit unconventional in terms of the topic in which we're going to be talking about, and the topic is kind of just all over the place as we hit about the 2-year mark in terms of the game's overall life.
Like Digimon's been out for what, just about 2 years now. Not
Yeah,
not a
it's
long time, but not a short time either. And
I think it's more just how the competitive structuring goes. Like, if there was an event, like literally right now, like in January, sure, okay, we would still have more meta conversation to talk about. But literally, there hasn't been any competitive events since the beginning of
like
December.
December 10th, yeah,
Yeah, it was
over a
like the
month ago.
first week of December, and then now we have literally absolutely zero all the way up until nationals. It's just like, I get it, like you don't have to put out a tournament every single month, but like a tournament every single month would be nice.
This would be the perfect time to do those like fucking like competitive events that aren't competitive events, but there's still something to win.
Like the online
Or
local type thing,
well no, like
like an Alti Cup.
online, yeah. Like, those are competitive events that people try hard at and they want to win because there's some prestige in it and you get some cool alt arts and whatever. And you could start that in January. You don't have to start that in the 2023 competitive season that doesn't technically start until March, I guess maybe April, May-ish, after Worlds is technically over, after Nationals is concluded and then Worlds takes place. Um,
I think part of it might be printing. Like, I think they're using this time to literally print the prizing for the whole year because they, based on how, what limited knowledge I have on how companies print, they probably had everything already, like all of the promos and whatnot, all of like the special edition cards, and they just sent them into print, and they're getting their proofs and all that stuff. So maybe that's like, I'm not trying to defend them or anything, but like maybe that's their excuse on
well, I mean,
why
it's not
there's
not saying that
nothing.
they don't have to do anything right now either, right? Like,
Right.
they still they aren't doing anything, and we're seeing the ramifications of them not doing anything. But at the same time, they could do something, and maybe they're taking this time to do other things, or um, I
Well,
know like another
well,
TCG I'm like just starting to follow that, I guess his name isn't even worth mentioning at the moment yet because it doesn't exist.
Battle
Is
Spirits.
no. Um uh like the creator was talking about how they're getting all their cards made in China, and Chinese New Year is actually going to like potentially impact their production line because they're not working for like 2 weeks or something. They take like 2 weeks off for Chinese New Year. It's like a big ass deal.
Jeez.
So, um, for them to get, production made, cards shipped, and then in people's hands by the, supposed date, they had to get in things before Chinese New Year. They had to get like their exact numbers set in stone before Chinese New Year because otherwise the delay would be like potentially a month or more.
Wow.
Especially because they come back from Chinese New Year with a laundry list of things they have to do that they haven't been doing for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So meta development is like a two-part process, unfortunately. Like there's not a whole lot of nuance that goes into it, right? Like just kind of see the decks at the extremes rise to the top in situations where there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Like like that's why SecCon became somewhat meta relevant. I mean, I say somewhat, like it was decently meta relevant and it is right now because The only thing that stops Melga X is having just a cracked ass security and making sure that their first in every swing kills that Digimon. And that's the only way to do so. Not enough decks have nearly like the security consistency. Until we end up in a place where security becomes something you select beforehand, like your egg deck. Like I'm picking these 5 cards to go into security, and then maybe you like remove recovery or something like that. Like they have like
Yeah,
separate
but
sleeves and everything.
I think the way the game is that's not happening.
That's what I mean. But like, so as a result of that, like decks like Melga X, as they currently stand, based on the current speed and power level of the game, until a bigger, badder deck comes along that prevents them doing from
Hey
exactly
there,
what
nerd.
they're currently doing, or they get restricted, it's the Yu-Gi-Oh problem. Like I don't want hand traps, but the only thing that stops Melga X right now would be like a hand trap.
I mean,
Okay,
right this very second, yeah, but
yeah,
next format when Black War Greymon comes in, the format does
it's
slow
just a
down.
bigger, it's just a bigger, badder dragon. Like,
Well,
you know,
the format does slow down because now you're going from a more aggressive deck to a more mid-range deck, or almost
what does that
control
even,
style of deck.
what does that even mean? I mean, I don't think like
Well, it
Magic.
means, uh,
Go ahead.
no. So like, in my perspective, like it doesn't necessarily take the OTK away. It just shifts where the resources are. So because of how Black War Greymon is and who he is, now he's the big bad. So what the dynamic of the meta shifts around him versus around Melga. Melga becomes less prevalent because he beats up on Melga like it was no tomorrow and it was like the easiest thing in the world. And then as a result, now security control goes away because the deck that it was trying to farm now is dying off. So
Mm-hmm.
you see this like shift in dynamic, and a lot of OTK decks just can't beat Black War Greymon because it's like, okay, if you literally can't kill me, which I have blocker twice, sometimes I'm bigger than you, like you're just in for a bad time.
Well, so I think that's the point. That's the kind of the crux of my argument is that
Actually, the speed of the decks isn't really changing either. So it's not that
so
much faster. It's just slowing down the game because it's not killing the opponent by by your go turns.
hmm well, I mean, yeah, like so that's kind of always been a thing. Outside of the things that broke the rules or the things that operated at different levels, like BT7, right? BT7 was really good, but we didn't know how imbalanced it was until it came out and then people played with it. But we know that BT11 is fucked. Like Virus Tribal or whatever is irrelevant.
Vaccine.
Any or vaccine. Anything they give
I don't think it's
to
that irrelevant because of Raid. Like, you just use Marsmon to beat up Black War Greymon and then GG.
I
It's
mean,
just it would struggle with some of the other decks is the problem. But that's also the grandest problem where it's just
are
like,
you
okay,
bigger than Black War Greymon ever?
you're in red. Of course you're bigger than Black War Greymon.
So what's the evolution line for a standard Marsmon? I want to do the math here because they're also in red.
Let me pull it up. So Marsmon
So
starts at
well, I guess
12.
Bearmon.
Yeah,
Bearmon
so
already
you have Grizzlymon and Bearmon. When attacking, when the
hits
attack
6,000
switches,
PP.
you get plus 3,000 for both of them. So yeah, plus 6,000. So you're
Okay,
18k beating over their potentially 14k Black War Greymon.
and then your level 5 you're running is
The level 5 is
Grapleo.
Grapleo to burn the
When
opponent's security when you delete
when
the
this attack
Digimon.
switches, trash the top card of your opponent's security, and then Marsmon, Raid,
To the
Raid
one to switch
Blitz,
it. Yeah.
and when the attack of your target switches, unsuspend this Digimon and gain 1 memory for each red tamer you have. That's never not going to end your turn anyway. It just gives your opponent less memory, I think.
Yeah, that's
Sometimes.
why he has Blitz, is because I think they kind of expected him, like, just Tamers to not exist on the field against a Black War Greymon deck, which is fair.
I think the problem is, I mean, so let's say you have both, right? You're fine. So it's, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. You're 18 at a level 6, no problemo. But if you're Black War Greymon X Antibody, you're rocking um one instance of protection
Which Raid gets over.
from with what?
Raid is attacking into the Digimon. That's Black War Greymon's weakness. Black War Greymon
Okay,
only has protection against
would
card
delete it.
effects.
Effect that would delete it. Okay. What about the old Greymon X?
Nope.
Okay.
Battle protection's only a Melga thing.
When a Digimon becomes unsuspended, trash the top card. That doesn't matter. Black War Greymon X, like its text doesn't matter. It's a 13k, and it's a red Digimon, so all of the inheritables would be your turn, ideally.
That's why Grandis is so good. Is because, oh, I suspend your Digimon. Beat it up. It just auto dies. Cool.
So,
Thanks.
well, and we also saw that Grandis still was like the fourth or fifth best deck in BT11.
Part of
even
it is
given
because they
that
figured it out too
situation.
late.
I think more so the problem is that one is an X antibody deck and one is not. Like, you only need, I think, one of them to matter. You only need either a Grizzly or a Bear to have the DP required to get over it. But generally, like the difference is, and we've kind of spoken to this before, just the nature of the X antibody mechanic is, if I draw a hand that's 3-3-4-4-5, that could be the perfect hand for Black War Greymon and a garbage ass hand for this Marsmon deck. Okay, I Digivolve into 3, draw.
I mean,
I still
yes,
don't have
it
a
is
6.
running less consistency tools because you don't have the Cool Boy and you don't have as many hardcore searchers. Like, I'm
Well, you
not
don't have
saying
the
you're not
X's,
wrong. I'm just
because
saying.
again, if you're drawing 2 3s, 2 4s, and a 5, half those cards you might as well throw away. Just they're my second stack that I may or may not get. And then, but for if one's a Greymon, one's a Greymon X, I use both of those. I replace both of those cards for free.
I mean, I'm not like disputing that. Like, there's inherent strengths to an X antibody deck versus a not X antibody deck. I'm just talking like in terms of a metascope thing. Attacking into Black War Greymon is one of the most viable ways to delete it, and Marsmon is one of the few cards that actually can do that. You have that, you have Grandis, and you have Jessamon, and that's it.
I mean, Gallantmon.
Galamon's not attacking into stuff. He would rather delete it by card effects or not delete it at all to get benefits. You're never playing Judgment of the Blade and Gallantmon just to attack into the opponent's Digimon. And maybe for Gallantmon, that is the spice tech you need in order to make your decks more successful. Like, who knows?
Your deck's below Beelzemon, by the way. I'm still going.
I understand nobody played it. I'm just saying, because of the fact that
Galactimon, or yeah, Galactimon, still going. I want to say maybe actually nobody played it.
no, there was a couple. There was like one or two. I think between Bergermon, or not Bergermon, Phoenixmon and Marsmon, there might have been a total of 3. Might have been. I know it's not a high amount, but regardless.
I know. Well, it's again, it's like we've already been having this conversation for like maybe 10 minutes, and for a deck that put up a net score of 3 compared to 104, I give it 2.8% of the time that I would give Black War Greymon.
It's a conversational piece. I know the deck hasn't put up any results, but knowing Black War Greymon's going to be the big boogeyman, and knowing the weaknesses, maybe it might. I don't think it is because people just play Grandis.
To me.
I don't think it's disingenuous. It's at least it's worth a mention.
Because it's like...
Because the topic is, like, if the topic is how do we beat Black War Greymon, it is a mention because it is one of the few ways and few decks that actually has a viable way of beating it. The problem is,
So
in the meta landscape, what are the rest of the decks doing? It probably does garbage into a lot of other decks.
so
So
I
therein lies the problem.
I like the idea actually. So here's the direction I'm going to take with it,
Okay.
because um what you've said is valid, and that makes sense.
That's the mindset I'm currently in right now when I'm looking at decks to play for BT11. It's just like, do I think
It
other decks
just
can beat Black War Greymon? The answer is no. Like, I'm mathematically formulating plays and like other stuff in my head, and I'm like, the only other deck that I'm like even remotely thinking about that's on my radar is Bloomlord, just because Bloomlord can
don't
suspend
really play
Black War
any
Greymon
tamers.
down and beat it up.
I don't really play tamers either.
Yeah, and they don't play
That's kind of
Tamers.
that's a requirement, because even if you're a deck that doesn't care about your tamers too much, you're not like the crux of your deck isn't tamers. Seeing some benefit from a tamer, having played a tamer for something. So even something like an Imperial Dramon would be hurt by Black War Greymon's existence, because they still want to play out their tamers. Like, they still want to play a Davis and start their turn at 3, and if they can't and they don't, they just kind of lose.
Yes. 100%.
So Black War Greymon's existence with that regard
Like
just kind of
the
you can't play any deck that even casually plays tamers.
I mean, and even if you do, they have to get value that turn and you have to expect everything to go away. And if it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't, that's the plus. So
Because
like
like
Bloomlord plays Mimi, but they only play like maybe 2 to 3 Mimi at most. If they see one Mimi, they're ecstatic. If they don't care.
hmm
I know Jessamon plays 0 Tamers. It's just all essentially memory boosts. Like
hmm
it's delay options. That's where they get their value from.
yeah, delayed options and Sistermons.
Yeah. Same story with Grandis. Like
I mean,
Mimi, they're cool.
Examon doesn't really want to play any tamers. That doesn't mean that Examon's good into Black War Greymon.
No, I mean Examon kind of wants Davis at the very least,
hmm
just to act as a good search tool because they're already in Davis's colors.
hmm
But you're not like crying just because of Davis died. But I don't know if Examon is exactly the best into Black War Greymon because you basically would start your Examon suspended every single turn because of how Black War Greymon works.
hmm
Because that's what makes the All Force matchup so bad. Is because if I have a Black War Greymon X, at the start of your turn, you lose evade, and then your Digimon dies because of reboot, and you can't do anything about that. What do we define as a good meta, basically? Because I know going
What did
into BT11, it might be
look
pretty
like?
heated.
BT6. BT6 was good.
Gabubon's
Everything
pre Icewall.
everything since then has been kind of eh.
I think BT8 was good. Like
BT8
BT8
was
before people learned that
yep.
um
Blue Hybrids
Blue
was still
Hybrids
really
was
good.
yeah.
Was still the best deck.
Yeah, I think that time period was probably one of the best metas. Oddly enough, according to the data, wasn't the most diverse meta. Uh, BT9 and 10 have, well, I guess BT9 and
BT10 doesn't count.
EX3 have
Yeah.
the most diverse metas, which is interesting, but they also had the most events played during that time. So it only
hmm
makes sense. But I think health wise, BT8.
Understanding, like, because some of these things just in the scope of a competitive environment, given like understanding a deck's weakness. Okay, like, so what is Melchizedek's weaknesses? Does my opponent play security threats? And
Well,
that's kind of it.
understanding. So part of it is reading the opponent's like the opponent's plays. So it's one of its weaknesses, every deck's weakness, and that's brickability. And how can you capitalize on them bricking?
Well, that's an if. That's not like a there's no like
I know
that's
it's
not
an
a
if.
that's like there's no brick phase of the game where it's okay, you know, I enter my brick phase. Do you have any responses? It's like, nope. Okay, I continue to my combat phase. It's I enter main phase. I digivolve into Garurumon. I pass turn.
How about spinning off of that idea? How about a brick phase? Like literally, how do you unbrick your deck?
Go to game 2.
Wow. All
You don't have
right.
time. You don't have time. The game's too fast. Things end in like 3 or 4 turns.
Mm, if everything is going 110% according to plan, sure. Most of
I
the
don't know,
time, that's
man.
actually not happening, and you know
I've
that.
I've only seen like Melga X kind of just like do whatever it wants to do for the last 3 months. So, yeah, maybe Black War Greymon doesn't just do 100% of what it wants to do, but it definitely does whatever it wants to do better than Melga X does. Otherwise, people would still play Melga X, and then we'd still end up in the same problem. Like, the problem isn't that I just want Melga X limited. Like, the game needs to like fucking chill.
Well,
Like as a whole,
that's
you
where
don't. I don't want a bigger shark. I just want no sharks.
well, it's not necessarily a bigger shark per se. Yes, it is kind of a bigger shark, but like just because Black War Greymon beats out Melga, it does inherently slow down the game because it's not trying to like unga bunga kill the opponent. It's maybe doing 2 checks a turn versus 5 or 6. Like there's a huge time differential when it comes to that. And that gives you the ability to try to figure out a way to break out of whatever lock that they have just because you know they're not dealing as much damage as some of the other decks have in the past.
I mean,
Like it is slowing down the format, but it's cannibalizing decks because of how good it is. It's weird. Or like not necessarily cannibalizing, just eating the meta space or the meta share because if you can't beat Black War Greymon, you just can't really play very much. And you just have to get lucky on seeing not Black War Greymon. I don't know exactly how many people are going to play Black War Greymon in comparison to some of the other stuff. Um, because I've been practicing with Rishi, and he's trying to figure out the ways to be able to beat out of Black War Greymon. Me obviously piloting Black War Greymon, and I'm like, you literally in he was playing All Force, and I'm like, you literally have to hope I brick, and that's it.
and that's
Like
the problem.
he had some interesting spicy tech though, with source removal because he was playing like Arctic Blizzard to like snipe the inheritable that gives me protection from bounce effects. So that way he could bounce my Digimon when he goes up. But I'm like the way the card is, it's just not efficient enough.
Like, I don't know. I just
Like I
I have
applaud the creativity, it's just
controller
inefficient.
cards in front of me. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Um,
Because Black War Greymon's a deck that usually wants to be more proactive than it seems. Like it has reactive plays for when it needs to, but most of the time, if you're going for a Black War X play, you just want that sucker sitting on the field.
then I'm gonna go 4x for 0. Draw. 5 going to 0. 5x. Draw. I don't know why I'm counting cards in my hand, because the whole point is that your cards in hand stay the same. And then I wouldn't digivolve into 6. I could then, like, I could play a Cool Boy here, assuming I had one, but also I've seen, uh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I've seen like a quarter of my deck already by turn 2. Um, so if I haven't seen a Cool Boy yet, something has gone terribly wrong. So I'm gonna play a Cool Boy for 2, give my opponent 2 memory, and then I have a level 5x in raising, which I don't even 5x in raising is probably not even good.
No, it's not. I'll tell you that. You usually so The big power turn is sitting on your level 4, and this is where like evolving into your level 5 super efficient is the problem. You sit on your level 4, which you could set up literally turn 2 or turn 1 actually. And then if you just have a cool boy on your field, you just move out and then you just screw the opponent and go all the way up into your level 6.
Hmm.
Like I honestly think that that is part of the problem in terms of like tempo and speed is when you just can move out on your level 4 and then just start going ballistic.
Because it's like, I don't know. I like the point I was trying to like math out for myself is understanding a deck's weakness, and again, given the current like, if there were like a rock paper scissors meta like there was in BT9, or like a tamer based deck that could get punished by a couple of cards that maybe aren't as efficient, but like you could still play Black War Greymon against Blue Hybrid, and if you ever got to the point where you had a Black War Greymon out, you won the game. And but we don't. And the point is like, how do you beat Black War Greymon? Well, you play Black War Greymon, or you go to game two. Like you expect them to brick and then go to game two when they don't.
I mean,
Like
even then, they could also try to play out of their brick. Like, it just means that they generally have a slower start.
Melga X has been pretty bad. I'm not gonna lie. A lot of people understand Melga X has been pretty bad, and like the fact that they nerfed Cross Hearts just for Melga X to just slide back into its place and just continue to be the absolute best deck, decidedly, is not fun.
I think a lot of the half of the systemic problem comes down to the
It's the
protections that these
speed and
decks
the
have.
aggression. Well, I guess yeah, the freeness of the speed and aggression. Like
Yes.
if it was any other deck, like let's say you could just give Bloomlord the ability to unsuspended attack at their level 5, but without the protections, thus far, then they attack with their 6k level 5. It dies. The turn is over. They cry.
Yeah. Like, and even just sitting there, like, this is why Black War can be proactive, is because it could just sit on its Black War X and expect it to almost never die to an option or removal card at all, just because what's actually going to kill it? Like, nothing. It has almost every protection that Alphamon had. In fact, I think it even has more.
Yeah, they're giving it. Well, it's because I think the game is just developing in a weird way, because look at BT5, right? BT5, not necessarily the peak of the game, not necessarily, the most fun or most balanced it ever was, but how do you win in BT5? Well, I make my big guy kill your big guy, and then that's
Yeah,
usually
the
how I win
chicken
the game.
game. Yeah, the chicken game. Because
But
there
like,
was no protections.
ah, and I think every time I think about how do you solve that problem, it's because other card games don't really do that,
Well,
or at least
they solved their problem with other deck types existing like hybrids. It's like, okay, you're still kind of playing this game of chicken, but you're playing it differently than your opponent. You're setting up your tamers, still doing stuff, while the opponent is setting up their Digimon in their stack. So it's like, okay, do I raise my Digimon out and then get screwed by their tempo and speed on Digivolving up into a level 6 with their hybrids? Or do I hold back and do something else? Like, and wait for them to go up their chain with their hybrids before I. Like, that's kind of the direction the game kind of has been going since I want to say BT4 is just this intricate game of chicken.
well, and it's I guess what I was saying is like, because like way back to when I like had kind of responded, you're like, oh, aggro control combo mid range, like Black War Greymon is technically by maybe Digimon's definition mid range, but what does that even mean in Digimon? Is it running fewer level 6s than a control deck? I think because the problem is the answer is there is no difference.
No,
There's no
there
distinction.
is
How many level 6s does Melga X run?
4, maybe 5.
How many does Black War Greymon run?
Uh, 6 to 7.
How many does SecCon run?
Uh, maybe 4. I don't know.
SecCon's an aggro deck.
Well, no, I'm talking about like the evolution of how these traditional style of decks like actually changed. Because if you look at like let's just say
I think it's just like it
BT3, it's like if we go back to BT3 Imperial, what is different about that deck than um like something today?
all of my cards say must be run in this deck only and not something else. Because the deck I was playing in BT3 was just generic green good stuff. You can't play that in any color at the moment.
Well, no, there also is a systemic difference because back then we were all playing 14 to 16 rookies. Now 12 just seems like a lot. So where is what happened there? Where is the difference? And the difference is the condensing on the
You only
cards
get
that
one
we need
stack a
because
game.
we only need to run one stack.
Hmm.
So that
The
is
cards
a
got better,
systemic.
so you run fewer of them.
Yes, so there is a systemic shift there where it's just like, oh, memory boosts, that was a huge game changer in terms of how decks are designed and how they can function and operate, especially in the face of what little tamer removal we still have in the game.
I feel like that's just baiting that question, that misinterpretation. Oh, we run fewer rookies because we're better at reading the decks and we're better at knowing how many rookies we need in a year later. No, the rookies just got better. We just need fewer of them. We run better level sixes. Why do we run fewer level sixes? Oh, because outside of these exact like 1.5 level sixes, I kind of can't run this deck. Psh, I mean, even let's just take a modern interpretation, right? You want to run the raid deck. What are you running other than Marsmon as your
Uh,
level six?
Phoenixmon.
The other card also released in BT7 or BT11.
I mean, you could run. You don't. You're not limited to specifically the new Phoenixmon. It's just the new Phoenixmon works with the tamer that works with vaccine that works with Marsmon as well.
Okay, let's say
Although the funny thing is, Marsmon just doesn't care about the. It cares about tamers, not Akiho specifically, because Akiho uh well, actually, it does because it's vaccine that it's working with. I thought it
what
was
level
the bird
six
beast or avian.
what level six are you running in Melga X?
Um, Metal Garurumon and Melga, and
Why?
Melga X.
Why?
Um, well,
It's
you
the
need a
only two
Metal
you basically
Garurumon.
can. It's the
Y-
best option for you have to run Melga X because it's the namesake of the deck. It's the best card of the deck, and you run the other metal the EX Melga because it's the best Metal Garurumon for the things that you could potentially want that body to do. And honestly, the only thing you really care about, truthfully, is the fact that you probably digivolve into it for cheaper.
yeah, that's the only part that they care
If
about.
they print a Melga tomorrow that digivolves for one and is a vanilla rookie or vanilla level six, you probably just play that. They're just printing better cards, and we're using the best options available,
Well, I mean,
which
if you
just
look at the
happens.
other Metal Garurumons, there's they're not really anything that great either. You have the demo deck, or not the demo deck. You have the starter deck one, which costs 4 and has 11,000. No, thank you. It can multi swing, which is nice. Can that definitely could do something. Um, then you have the BT5 one, which actually has an inheritable to gain your memory back, which could theoretically be good for Melga. If Melga's multi swinging, and the when digivolving effect is the same as the when attacking effect. It's just it costs 3. It's just hard locked to costing 3.
Spread further, just because I'm trying to prove a point here. What level sixes are you running in Bloomlord Hydra?
Uh, they were running
Why'd they make the
Rafflesimon
swap?
before they had Hydramon.
Why'd they switch?
Because Hydramon was just better?
and was printed more recently.
I
Okay, why
mean,
are they running Blue Lord?
so part of this comes from block design. Like there's obviously a block design here.
Mm-hmm.
They want you to start buying into a deck in BT10. BT11, here's some more support. BT12, here's some more support. EX3, here's some more support. EX4, here's some more support. Like that's the structure that they're going for. If a new deck is formed in any of those sets after BT10, cool. They'll support it in the next set regardless. They've always done that. Like look at we could go all the way back to let's just say BT3 and BT2. Um
But I think that's the point, though. Like, is why are our decks different now? Because we have to. Like we didn't necessarily get better at making decks. We didn't necessarily make. We're not making more efficient choices. The cards themselves got more efficient. They got more specific in their usage. I'm not just picking the best level 6 available, period dot, for green. I'm picking the level 6 that also happens to care about, do I have plants slash veggies slash flowers or fairies? And it's better when I do. Oh, and there's enough to support the archetype so that I can run a deck full of veggies and plants and fairies, and my deck is actually, if it's a little bit better for it, not worse. Like, I don't have to run cards that are objectively worse, that are, you know, Red Vegiemon doesn't digivolve for 2 because it happens to be a veggie. It's still the cheapest card I could be running. It happens to fit into the archetype. That's almost like the failings of Crosshearts, where Crosshearts technically the cards are objectively more expensive for their archetype to fit into this weird 4-color tamer based mishmash. And then that's why people, like, I guess rightfully so, played it and it was ass. It was not good.
it's
And then
it's not
they
that it wasn't
decided
not good, it's that it really needed Sunrise Buster.
it was ass. No, let's playing the cards the way that you think they're meant to be played versus playing them the way that they should be played. Playing Crosshearts, like, I'm gonna go into my cross 5 and I'm gonna make a big shout 5, and he's gonna be super cool, and he's gonna have sec+1 and blocker and be a big boy, and he's
Well,
the super rare and he wins me the game. But if you don't have any cross 4s first, you've lost.
well, part of the problem is just how good Cross 4 was.
Mm-hmm.
So, like,
That's what
I'm
I mean.
not I'm not saying you're not wrong. It's like the way Crosshearts wanted is it didn't want Digimon to actually stick on the field. It wants its
Mm-hmm.
Digimon to hide under the tamers to use for the big crosses and then the crosses to go away and reset. So that way you're still like that's its dex, like that's their form of protection. They don't have this Digimon can't be X. They just have this Digimon just doesn't want to exist on the field at all, but I also want to keep my sources. And I also just don't want to end the turn with a Digimon on my field so that way you could punish me for it. And I think that's where like the whole Cross 5 thing is failing is not necessarily because Cross 5 isn't bad. It's just it has a lot of setup and the fact that it sticks around, it has blocker, sure, whatever. Um to try to stop the opponent, but like that's what I noticed when I was playing Cross Hearts was I don't want my Digimon on the field. I want them to suicide into the opponent's security, go away, and then just fuel a later bigger turn to just auto win me the game. And that's what Cross 4 enabled.
I think, and it's kind of like the what I see, like the dichotomy of like current Digimon design. There can exist decks that are balanced but strong, that don't feel objectively oppressive to play against because they have a chance to not go your way. And I think that's current Crosshearts, though no one's playing it because the decks that are good and are so good that they are just absolutely curbing out, they're stifling innovation because why would I play a deck to where I could end up with a turn of all Tamers or all Digimon when I want to mix of both, when I could just play a deck that is just all Digimon and half of them can cycle themselves. Also, you attack at the level 5 with protection and half of them multiple times for multiple checks. Like, that's a no-brainer. So, but then we move to Black War Greymon territory, and it's less of that, but more of, okay, like because I think Jesmon's a good example of a deck that is fair, very strong when it goes off, very strong when things go their way. Then they're not necessarily the fastest deck on the market because they need a couple pieces to get going, but it's those conditional strengths. There's different power levels of Jesmon. Whereas, like, technically for Melga, there's really only one power level. Maybe you're missing an instance of protection, but realistically, you're not. You're not doing anything if you don't see protection at all. You're not doing anything if you just never see the initial level 5, right? There's never a situation where you're gonna Digivolve straight in Aware X and then promote and swing.
I mean, if you are desperate enough and you can't see your piece, yes, you will do that.
Well, because I guess
As
my
long as you
argument
have
here,
the X antibody. Because, like, that's
I
part. Like I said, I've played the deck enough to know it's not 100% consistent all of the time. There were some games
mhm.
where I struggled to find one of the missing pieces, and I had to respond to the opponent in some capacity because I can't always OTK. Like, that's the big misconception that people just don't understand. Not all of these OTK decks actually OTK. I can tell you how many times I've
You
actually
only need to do it
OTK'd.
2 times
Well, no.
against me.
I mean, I can tell you in tournaments how many times I actually OTK the opponent with a full Melga stack. And it's
It's not the
usually.
OTK really. It's the you've basically put the. I mean, like just think about it. Like
No, I
the,
know where you're going. I put the knife
mhm.
to your throat. Even though you are not dead, you are basically left bleeding out on the floor, and you have to find a way to stop the bleeding in order to have
Mhm.
a semblance of a chance of
And
survival.
even stemming the bleeding doesn't necessarily help because I'm left with either 1 or 0 security and very little or nothing to show for it.
But this is where protection actually starts to matter on making your cards either safe against a crackback or safe from the initial beating.
Because like Jesmon, like I said, like you have to run sisters, which are innately less consistent. They're bricks. You can play them to do something, but they're not really that great just to be played. You don't really want to just play out a bunch of Sistermons. And then you've got your Jesmon pieces. You've got you can do your Jesmon stack, but you have limited pieces there. You only have regular Digimon. You only have one X antibody Digimon, which you're usually using in place of regular Jesmon, not over regular Jesmon by most, Jesmon standards.
See, like, the funny
Um,
thing is, like, Jesmon is an X antibody, and I think if they went that direction with the rest of the X antibodies, I think maybe it would have been better.
I, I mean, yeah, I guess like, would I be afraid of Melga X without Were X and Garuru X and Gabu X? No, that would be a very fair deck. Genuinely, very fair. You'd have no protection. You don't swing at your level 5. You go into your 6 and do something, right? Like
Right,
they
like, they
could have
could have.
left.
Like, I get the idea that they were going for with Digivolving on top of the other Digimon. I think inherently they should have just had it cost, like, a literal reduced cost to 1.
One. Yeah,
I
like
think the
one
0
even.
was a mistake, and they should have learned that all the way back from BT3 with Argamon. It's like, yeah, Digivolving for 0 and being able to increase your tempo for Digivolving for nothing is a huge inherent problem.
Or just, here's a thought. Just apply, the old rules forward. You can't Digivolve for 0 in Raising. You can't use the alternate Digivolution condition in Raising. Maybe that just makes it ass, but
No,
there's no
because that
reason why
affects
you.
more than just X antibodies.
Well, I mean, they could have just made it different, because I think, like, Alphamon and its entire X line is lore relevant, way more so than
Well, most of the time they're
Gabu
not actually
X.
digivolving. Most decks, like the good X antibody decks, don't actually digivolve into their X outside of their level 3 if they have one in raising. Because, like I said, most of these powerhouse decks will move out at 4, gain tempo, turbo 5, then go into 6, and then hard crap on the opponent. Melga X actually doesn't do that because it doesn't care about gaining the tempo. It cares about gaining the tempo on the level 5 to make the level 6 more playable, rather than trying to make the level 5 more playable, because they don't need to.
I basically, because I'm kind of taking your thought and running with it, but like, you just remove everything that isn't a level 6 X antibody. Just except for maybe Alphamon, because it's like lore relevant, and also it's been banned now, so who cares?
Well, no,
Like they
like
banned.
they could have done X antibodies like Alteris mode from BT5. Like they could have done something like that.
It can digivolve over same level for 0, but outside of raising.
No, just alternate digivolution condition. Um, so like Digivolve for 3 on top of level 4, or Digivolve for 1 on top of level 5. Like,
hmm I mean, yeah, that would work more so too.
and
I
then
mean,
design the X antibody cards to be more flavorful when you Digivolve it on top of each other, just like the old Alteris mode.
I mean, you could even basically. I don't want to like make the cards too wordy, but like some way, because it's like,
Yeah, or just make the X antibodies not busted, because we
well,
not all the X antibody cards are busted. Like Salamon
I mean,
X, is anyone running that?
well,
No.
you could make it. You could make it like a true like modal shift. Like why why is it something that is possible in the card space to go Gabu X, regular Garurumon? Like almost make the X antibodies define the line as a conditional, you know, portion of the evolution. Okay, you can go in raising Gabu X. Congratulations, you're now limited to X antibody Digimon moving forward because you are an X antibody Digimon. Or like make it get like fucking weird and like because do you couldn't add the text of like the negative or like the missing example, but you could do it like, okay, Gabu X costs 0 to digivolve over a Gabumon. Fine, cool, same exact thing. But now Gabu X also all maybe just like an aura text for Gabu for X antibody Digimon. When digivolving into a non-X antibody Digimon, increase its cost by 1. Works in raising, works whatever. Like, okay, well now Garurumon costs 3 because you went Gabu X.
Oh,
Is
okay.
that worth it?
I
No,
see what you're saying.
because
So
you're paying. You don't have to pay for the actual X antibody evolution, make that work the same, but you're forced, like you're paying to transition back and forth, because then you're basically it's like not almost worth it. It makes them cost 1 without making them cost 1, because you could go 3-3 4, but it costs 3. Or maybe in the more realistic example, you know, 3-4 pass turn, next turn 4x 5, but 5 costs 4 now, not 3.
the only problem, which isn't
Or you could go
necessarily a
straight
problem, is
from
Cool Boy.
4x.
Like the only
Yeah,
problem that's not necessarily a problem, because it forces them to then go out of
leave raising
racing
to
in
make it
order to
cost
make
0.
it cost even.
Yeah, which makes perfect sense. Because now, because what you could also do is maybe you lean into that, design philosophy is, and not that they want to make it super restrictive, but maybe making it more balanced is like, is a Melga X without all the X's or without all the non-X's a good deck? Like Melga X only running the X antibody line. You only have Gabu X's, Garuru X's. You don't have the normal ones because they're too prohibitively difficult to digivolve into. So now you can go again 3-3, but the 4 is more expensive. You're paying a tax to go into the but it like or you just pay 4 for 2 if you go into Garuru X. And
I,
then you can digivolve into for 3 into Wereguru X. And maybe that makes it so that there's points or you know, actual decisions to be made on it's worth the extra cost for this extra inheritable sometimes. And it's not just free fucking cycle.
I don't know, because like I said, not all X antibody decks are broken. Like nobody's playing Magnadramon X antibody. Like
Yeah, but nobody's
I
playing yellow cards, period.
I
It's a
mean
bad example.
but I'm saying like because they have two different ways on doing X antibodies. They have like the Jesmon way and they have the Melga way or the Wargreymon way. Like there is this slight divide and shift on how they wanted to approach X antibodies, and I think like that, like obviously they're not going to change a darn thing. We already know this. This is all just hyperbole on how they could have done something, um, and not even saying R&D is even good or not. It's just I don't know. It's it's just complicated. I think they really just need to stop doing X antibodies for a hot minute. Like they really need to stop. Like give the Diaboromon players Diaboromon X and then be done, please. Like I don't think they know how to tactfully handle X antibodies as a whole because even without Cool Boy, the decks are still really good because of the flexibility and utility that you have on how you could utilize your cards because you could use them literally as a normal level 4 or if you already have another level 4 just use it on top of it and it's just like oh okay like I think just extra utility is what makes X antibody decks already systemically better than normal decks even though you are asking for more pieces but you're really not at the same time. it's it's weird. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I know there's still just a whole bunch of X antibody Digimon that they could do. I just really want them to take a break with a whole X antibody deck because the like I'm not saying War Greymon was a huge mistake. I just think like just supporting something too much inherently causes problems because now you're giving whatever you just supported a butt ton, Agumon, so many more tools to have access to while everything else isn't growing as equally. Which is why in Japan, War Greymon and Greymon based decks are still the only things people play. It's because Greymon has so many tools in his toolbox and they're just picking the best ones. Cause like let me pull up the Japanese stuff cuz I don't have that in front of me. So like right now, looking at the Japanese decks, the best deck is still Greymon by a long shot, in all of its various forms. The second best actually has been Beelzemon, but that's just because, again, Beelzemon just got a starter deck, and then it got one wave of support that just so happened to be X antibodies. Uh, and then the third best deck is, I believe, the Omnimon deck? No, it's Hunters. Hunters still. I could have swore the Omnimon deck was still high up there. Then Blue Flares. Blue Flares is kind of getting up there. Then Bloom Lord. And then it's the Omnimon deck, which uses a lot of the generic Agumon tools that Red Black has been getting, more supporting the black side. So that's the what fifth best deck? One, two, three, four, five. It's the sixth best deck, but oh well. Okay, so maybe bad example, but the fact that Agumon and Greymon X in all of its different variations and forms is still just generically lumped as the best is kind of a problem because it just has the most tools on top of having X antibodies.
Well, there's also what I wanted to say about like the real crux of why like mid-range combo, like or I guess mid-range and control decks don't really exist in Digimon under the same lens, is because as they're defined by like Magic terms or even like Hearthstone terms, like deck like card games that have fixed costs associated with things, like you would say that a Megazoo deck slash a Seccon deck is a control deck because their cards are meant to control, but also traditionally are higher costed. They don't have too many like 2 mana turns, 2 memory turns, or too many plays. Period. Outside of like the purple Mimi, just because it kind of makes their shit expensive or cheap or taxes you. Like, but a mid range, is almost like the true like curve where their most frequent like cost would be their um I don't know, 4 drop, and then an aggro deck would be like 1 2 with basically no more than like nothing costing more than 3, and
Well,
you can't
Digimon
really
doesn't.
translate
Yeah,
that
because
over because you're building up one thing instead of making more big things like because basically the magic example would be you know turn 1 play a 1/1 pass, turn 2 play a 2/3 for 2 pass. I made two separate things with the same amount of memory that you would use in Digimon, and then now, okay, if I have a turn 3 play, okay, tempo, turn 3, I play a 3 drop creature, but the aggro deck, maybe their turn 2 isn't, you know, a 2 drop. It's 2 1 drops. Maybe their turn 3 is a 1 drop, and a 1 mana spell, or a 1 drop and a 2 mana spell. Like, it's those decisions that Digimon lacks due to its evolution mechanic, unfortunately. Because how do you make a mid range level 5? Make it cost 4 or 5? It's just more expensive for being maybe better. Like, I guess Black Raymon kind of has that in its level 5 in, the BT8 version. But does that make it a mid range deck? Because we're both running the same amount of level 5s, same amount of level 6s. They cost basically the same. They do different things, but
no, because
there's
I
there's no situation where like an aggro deck like Rookie Rush was maybe the true example of that because they actually were creating separate bodies. And if I wiped your board, like, well, you're fucked because you just invested into these separate 3 or 4 separate bodies versus one thing that is a level 5 or level 6 that when you get rid of, you just make another level 6, but they still cost the same. You're still running the same amount of them.
I think part of the problem is comparing the apples to oranges because it's just like you have the chance for your rookies that you're hard playing for like two to die to security, and then now you lost that body. You no longer have it, and the opponent literally did absolutely nothing. Versus Magic, where it's just always going to be a problem unless you create a bigger body to stop it yourself. So there's
Mm-hmm.
very, very distinct differences in just how the games function in terms of risk and reward when it comes to that type of a playstyle. I do think like true mid range just that's why I kind of did like my whole like different deck breakdown video where it's just like there's three different ways to be able to build decks. Traditional, which I would label as the more mid-range decks. Then you have your hard play decks, which is either going to be shifted to your control decks or your aggro decks. And then you have your tamer decks. Well, actually, I would think the tamer decks are also more mid-rangey because you're still creating separate entities. And then it's just when you decide to go up the chain. And I think that like that is the big shifting point is how fast you can either A, deal the damage, or B, go up the chain to screw over your opponent. And the decks that can do it faster are obviously going, like, that can go up faster, are the ones that are going to be more successful, which is why I'm still okay with Argamon level 5 being at 1 copy, because, again, that huge shift in dynamics really screws over the opponent um, because they've invested so much into their one stack. They couldn't kill you, and now it's gone, and now they have to rebuild, and they're staring at a big level 6 across the table. And I think like that's the dynamic of Digimon that maybe people aren't exactly jiving with anymore. Is just the shift to the whole chicken and punishment game, um, almost dialed up to 11 because now decks can deal more damage.
I think like it's also it's wrong to look at games in a vacuum. And I think something that can be said about older Digimon, as like the quote unquote chicken meta of Digimon is you still learn from mistakes and learn from choices made. And while the game isn't always the same, unfortunately, I wish it were, like, there's things to be learned, and then you can play with, luck and margins the other way. But I think about it like chess, right? Like the world's literal most balanced game of all time, where you still have a pretty decent chance of winning if you're going first if both players are equally skilled. Or even, if the white player is even a little worse just because of the inherent advantage of just dictating the game pace, you know, gives them an advantage. But in chess, there's some like there is still that chicken element kind of, and it's just different variations on standardized lines of play, which is basically what I would like Digimon to be more like, and what I've had experiences with Digimon with when there are decks that it's not, maybe one deck is favored or whatever, but there's interaction, there's actual choices to be made, questions to be asked and answered of your opponent. And, so it's like, okay, you know, I swing with my level 6 and, or I, raise, Digivolve into level 6. Maybe I swing, like, and I pass turn. And opponent will raise their level 6 and then kill my level 6. Like, oh shit, okay, well, that was wrong. So next time, I'm not gonna raise and, go straight into Lord Nightmon, or I'm gonna instead play a Tamer or a Rookie and pass turn also. So I've done less damage, but you could basically practice like increasingly depth. Okay, so now I'm at the point where I know I'm gonna do X and my opponent is gonna do Y, and then I'm gonna do X and my opponent is probably gonna do Y. But okay, he actually does Z. Okay, now we've diverted to, this game state where my opponent has responded in this specific manner that I'm less practiced on. And now, how does the gameplay go from here? Was that a better move for my opponent? Was that a worse move for my opponent? I can, like, analyze the interactions between the two, basically moving chess pieces of the chicken of the game as well. Actually, I think I'm in, 2 turns later, I'm in a better spot than I am if my opponent had done X instead of Z. Like, but that just is currently inherently like absent from the game because of the decks at the top being what they are. Unless you are playing the same deck. There's still a lot of fun and of that element to be played in a, but I guess maybe not uh Melga specifically because of the way in which it ends the game immediately. But a Black War Greymon versus Black War Greymon, maybe there's a lot of value in learning that mirror matchup. Like the where there was value in learning the Lord Nightmon mirror matchup. I feel like I was pretty good at the Lord Nightmon mirror matchup at the time. You know?
No, I totally get what you're saying. So that's all the time that we have this week. So next week we'll probably pick up with this discussion on chicken, and I hope everyone has a wonderful night.